achieved.
The post-title fight letdown rears its ugly head again and costs us significantly. Holly Holm was the fighter of my pick going into the main event at UFC Fox on 20. I was 9-1 going into that fight with 4 massive upsets already in the books. I had a ton of money riding on that matchup, both in my personal bets, both in the bet pack. We'd already cashed a little bit with the silver parlay hitting. We'd missed out on a couple other ones by 1 pick. And she just, after the first round, basically was unable to adjust. Valentina Shevchenko did an excellent job of making the proper adjustments and went out there and got the job done. And we've seen it in previous fights, and I won't get into too many details, but where a fighter loses either their belt or they lose in their attempt to win the belt when they were at the challenger, and they come out flat. And it's really difficult. It's a psychological thing for a lot of fighters. They get to the top of the mountain and they get turned back, and now it's like, oh, I'm starting all over again, or at least I'm starting from a lower point and I have to rebuild. And it's a very difficult scenario for them to overcome, and a lot of times we see them suffer in their next performance. They might rebound and get right back to where they're going, but not always. And this is one of those situations, I think, with Holly Holm, and it was a really tough situation for her. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and we'll be breaking down the upcoming UFC 201, which will take place on July 30th, 2016 from the Phillips Arena, Atlanta, Georgia. I'll be giving you my 5 main card predictions, including a crackerjack of a welterweight main event featuring Robbie Lawler taking on Tyron Woodley. I've done a lot of research for that. That's one thing I did for the last show, is I broke down every fight. A lot of times I watch footage, 1 or 2 fights. I've usually watched pretty much the entire UFC and pre-UFC career of a lot of the fighters I break down. But for this show, I had a good chance to sit down and watch 3 or 4 fights per fighter. And I went back to all my old notes and pulled out all points and bullet points and things I thought were important. And I did that for every single fight on the card, except for the main event. I just felt very confident in my understanding of the 2 fighters, and it was just, I was off base. And between the 2 factors, the factor I already mentioned, Holly Holm didn't get the job done, it cost us big time. I've meticulously gone over these 5 main card fights, every single fight, even fights I felt comfortable predicting beforehand. I wanted to go through and look at all the finer details on each side and make sure I was confident in my predictions. So I'll give you my 5 main card predictions. Currently, like I said, 9-2 coming off that show, pretty good. The bet packs produced, I think there was like 40 units in winnings, 30 somewhere in there, 34.6, sorry, not quite 40. The DraftKings numbers were 356 and 309, so they were pretty solid. Confidence picks, 4 of them hit. Value picks, my number 1, 3, 4, and 5 value picks, all cash. So those were all solid picks overall. And right now, if you go to the bet shop, you can pick up this bet card for $12 and get all the information for UFC 201, or you can get the next 8 for, I believe it is $72, and you're saving $24. That's a great deal. You're basically getting 2 shows for free to get all of August and all of September. So your choice. If you're winning on your own, continue to do so. That's fantastic. Also, make sure you vote in the polls. I will be, they're up and running now. You can vote on who you think is going to win each matchup. We've got a fantastic card ahead of us with some very fun matchups. Let's get to that first main card prediction. We open the pay-per-view in the UFC's flyweight division as the 5th-ranked Ian Uncle Creepy McCall, with a current record 13 wins, 5 losses, and 1 draw, takes on Tank Justin Scoggins, currently ranked 13th in the division with a record of 11 wins and 2 defeats. Now, McCall's coming into this matchup in a very rough point in his career. He's had an 18-month layoff. He's had a couple other layoffs prior to this one. He's going into other fights. He's suffered some injuries. He's talked about retiring. And he's at a point where he just doesn't know if he wants to do it anymore. So you have to wonder where he is mentally. Where is his focus at? On the other side of things, Scoggins is heading into this matchup off the biggest win of his career, where he dominated another highly touted prospect in Ray Borg. It's actually his second win in a row after his first 2 career defeats. So he's definitely rebounded nicely after a couple of setbacks. Physically, the younger fighter, Scoggins, 8 years younger than Ian McCall. He'll have a 2-inch reach advantage, and he's 2 inches taller. Now, looking at their records, Scoggins 6 wins by knockout, 1-1 in fights ended by submission, and 4-1 in the scorecards. He comes from a black belt in karate, and we'll talk about that momentarily. For McCall, 4 wins by knockout, 3-1 in fights ended by submission, 6-4 on the scorecards, and he is a BJJ purple belt. Also comes from a pretty solid wrestling background. And it's worth noting he is the last man to step into the cage with Demetrius Johnson and not lose the fight. He had that draw in their first meeting in what was the semifinals to crown the flyweight champion. Now, for Scoggins, he is a very unique, well, not unique fighter, he's a very different. There are other fighters that have a similar style, and we'll talk about one momentarily, but he uses footwork very effectively, switches stances, but he has that sideways stance, which really throws people off. It comes from that karate base. He uses a lot of angles, and he mixes up a number of different kicking techniques that really throws his opponents off, and he disguises them well because they don't know what is coming, and it makes them far more effective. He has a very similar approach to Stephen Thompson. And it's not surprising because those two came up through the ranks together and trained a lot together before they gone their separate ways. So you see a lot of their those styles overlapping. Some of his better techniques, he has that front leg side kick to the body. He'll throw a hook kick to the chin again off that front leg, which is very difficult to pick up. A push kick down the middle, just some traditional hard low kicks. He also has a very nice straight left, which he'll step in with and catch guys as they are either backing up or trying to move forward and attack. Now, when you look at the numbers between McCall and Scoggins, you see that their output is it's very similar. It's very close, in the high threes. But Scoggins gets hit almost 1.75 strikes less per minute. And that's big. That's a lofty difference over a 15-minute fight. And those numbers will pile up. He moves away very well to limit his opponent's offense. A lot of times they hit him once and he is out of there. He's gone. And, that's because they have trouble dealing with his unorthodox way, stance, and style of fighting. Opponents need to really fake and feint their way into range or time his entries and counter strike. That's another way to deal with him, but it's easier said than done. He likes to use those kicks to keep his opponent out of range. Have them, when they move forward, he's very capable of changing levels for a takedown. He's a very good wrestling base, and that throws them off. That's one more element that they need to deal with when they're facing him. If they look to shoot him, he has a very good sprawl. They are forced to come from the outside, which is much further away because of that distance. And, he uses those overhooks or underhooks and gets back up very effectively, which is a nice thing to see. On the cage, look for him to use that clinch. He does a good job with his head position to shut down any clinch attack. It's very difficult to attack a guy when his head is jammed up under your chin and raising your head up to the roof. Nice reactive double leg. He'll also go for some trips inside. Against Moraga, he had some nice takedowns as well. As Moraga came forward, he countered with takedowns. Ultimately, got caught with his neck exposed and submitted, which was definitely disappointing, but I think he's rallied from that. Good top position, remains very active, aggressive guard passer, very good scrambler as well. With Ian McCall, he has excellent speed, uses a lot of lateral movement in his attack. Good footwork overall. He darts in very quickly to attack, and he evades in a very effective manner. He likes to use a lot of different angles on exit, just like Demetrius Johnson does, which makes him very hard to counter as he's coming in and getting out. But he has struggled at times when he gets lured into a slugfest, and opponents know they can throw down with him and draw him into just sitting there and heaving heavy leather, looking to just land that home run shot. Now, his best offense comes when he blitzes straight forward. But we saw guys like Brad Pickett and John Lineker time and counter him and backed him off with those techniques. He does have a tendency to let his hands drop a little bit. Benavidez and Lineker both hurt him, and when he got dragged into those situations where he was getting hurt, he didn't do as well with the power factor in his face. He has very good wrestling. We saw him take down Demetrius Johnson 5 times over 2 fights. As I said, he's a purple belt, solid sprawl. Does a very good job of defending takedowns. Also shut down a lot of Demetrius Johnson's takedown attempts. Good level change when his opponent comes in, sets it up with strikes. When he goes forward. A good double leg. Brad Pickett, though, was able to get up fairly quickly when he was taken down. He'll also see a trip takedown from the clinch position. When McCall's overall style, though, it tends to keep fights very close. As I said, he gets hit almost as much as he hits his opponents, and Scoggins is much harder to hit than Ian McCall is. I think Ian McCall is going to have a lot of trouble setting up his strikes and takedowns with that blitzing style where he moves straight forward in kind of a linear fashion when he's looking to enter the attack zone. And I think we're going to see a lot of counters or just Scoggins not there for him to be hit. I think Scoggins is going to keep him guessing. He's going to land all those kicks to keep him out of range. I think he'll have better impact and better quality of strikes overall. He's going to shut down McCall's wrestling, and he's going to use that clinch as well. Anytime McCall tries to tie up with him, use his size against him. And my prediction is Justin Scoggins to defeat Ian McCall by decision. Fight number 2 in the main card takes place in the UFC's bantamweight division as Francisco Cisco Rivera, 11 wins, 6 losses, and 1 no contest, takes on Mexico's Erik Gallito Perez with a current record of 15 wins and 6 defeats. Now, for Rivera, his back is certainly against the wall. He has just 1 win in his last 5 matchups, but if you look at that span, he lost a very controversial split decision against Brad Pickett in his last fight. He had the eye poke defeat against Uriah Faber, which was certainly another issue where it was like he was holding his own very well against a very tough opponent and had the unfortunate ending. For Perez, he returned after well over a year to fight Taylor Lapalus in his last matchup and picked up a victory. Which was a very impressive win for the young fighter who had kind of hit a bit of a slowdown in his run as well. As far as common opponents are concerned, both have losses to Kei Mizugaki and both have wins versus Edwin Figueroa, Rivera coming by knockout, Perez taking a decision. Physically, both men are 5'8", both have a 68-inch reach, so physically they're matched up very well. Perez is 8 years younger, though, much younger than Rivera. Looking at Perez, first 4 wins by knockout, 7-2 in fights ended by submission, 4-4 on the scorecards. For Rivera, 8-1 in fights ended by knockout, 0-3 in submissions, and 3-2 on the scorecard. So both guys having trouble picking up victories in fights, or consistently winning fights that go the distance. Perez, aggressive striker, very aggressive striker. He has improving power. He's picking up more and more knockouts as his career expands. Works very good in close range, and he's also a very solid clinch fighter where he'll land some very hard knee strikes. When he fought Takeya Mizugaki, you saw him start to get away from that wild, aggressive style at times, where he was much more technical and conservative and effective at times. He didn't wing those punches overall when he was coming in. His numbers are fairly solid. 3.23 strikes landed per minute versus 1.66 strikes absorbed per minute. He throws a very nice left hook to the body, and he throws that right hook to the chin, which dropped Edwin Figueroa. He has a very nice right hand. He'll switch in a lot of the times. He'll roll his opponents come in and then throw that right hand over the top as he evades what they throw, and they don't see it coming, which makes that technique that much more effective. His hooks and the way he throws them a little bit wide do leave him open for shots down the center. And Figueroa was landing a decent right hand of his own against Perez, but he got tired in that matchup and just simply wasn't nearly as effective. Perez needs to put combinations together instead of looking for power shots. He needs to, lots of feints and fakes to set up his offense. And if he can he gets drawn into a brawl, he can be effective. And we've seen him stop guys in this situation. But again, it opens him up for attacks as well. He has a nice, well-timed front kick from range, which can do damage and create distance. Hard knees to the body inside. And recently he's moved to Alliance MMA, and you can see in his last fight when he fought Lapalus, he used some of that Dominic Cruz style footwork, which made him very difficult to time on the outside and made his setup, his strikes a little bit better. When he fought Figueroa, he mixed his striking, his takedowns up, which was a very nice, deviation from just standing and banging. He has a nice single leg takedown. He'll change to a double, and a lot of his takedowns come along the cage. That's where he's very successful. 3.48 takedowns at a 60% completion rate. Fairly solid wrestling numbers. Look for him. He will look to time a kick and grab it for a single leg. We saw him do it against Figueroa and Mizugaki. Lapalus, he tried the same thing, didn't quite complete the takedown, but still the technique was there. He took Mizugaki down a couple times. He's a very difficult guy to take down. He does a nice job of sucking those hips out once he gets on the inside. And once he gets on top, good ground and pound, lots of elbows and body shots. And he's very offensive minded when he gets on top, and I like to see that. Now with Rivera, he's a Muay Thai based striker, very hard kicks. He'll mix in elbows. He keeps his hands up very well. He chambers his strikes effectively. Flips out a nice left jab, straight right combination. As I said, very hard leg kicks as well. When he took on Edwin Figueroa, he took him out because Edwin Figueroa's cardio and technique weren't as good. Figueroa was having a lot of success early and hurt Rivera, but he slowed down, and Francisco was able to capitalize. We also saw him take out Alex Caceres with a brutal left hook. Even though Caceres kind of argued the decision for the stoppage, it was still a devastating left hook that he got hit with. He has a nice right hand. He'll mix in an uppercut as well. Those leg kicks can really take away a lot of the mobility of his opponent. He is better when he's using movement and attacking and mixing things up. He got dropped by Brad Pitt. He's already dropped Brad Pitt with the right hand, and he was mixing up his attack, and he incorporated a lot of movement, and that's where he's effective. When he gets drawn into a brawl, and we've said this a couple times already, he can take some damage. And against Lineker and against Pickett, he got clipped with some big shots. Even Figueroa landed some shots. Mizugaki hurt him in close. And it's just not the ideal way to fight, especially if you don't have an ironclad chin. Against Figueroa, he's hit with a big overhand right, which is a weapon that we talked about with Perez is going to offer him. Drop with a left hook as well in that matchup. He tends to stand in front of his opponents at times when he's not moving around, and that's, again, it makes him much more hittable. He will reach with his punches a bit, keeps his head on the center line when he does attack, and when he sits down in his strikes, and again, it makes him an easier target to hit. He has good takedown defense. He gets his hips back and will scramble, but he's still going to be taken down. He's got multiple submission losses on his record. And that's something to keep in mind here against Perez, who has showed he's capable on the ground. Nice takedown. He did some nice takedowns against Figueroa and Mizugaki. I don't anticipate seeing him taking down Erik Perez here. I think he's going to look to stand and bang. For Rivera, he needs to mix up his attacks, use a lot of movement, mix in those takedowns if he sees the opportunity. But he tends to be way too linear and look simply for power shots. Perez is going to have success countering with that right hand, mixing in the kicks, using that footwork to avoid, and just changing things up and making Francisco Rivera kind of charge forward and look to attack. Look for some takedowns of Perez, especially along the cage. He's going to wear Rivera down once on top. He'll really break him down. And my prediction is Erik Perez to defeat Francisco Rivera by decision. Fight number 3 in the main card is a welterweight matchup as the 9th-ranked Matt the Immortal Brown, 22 wins and 14 losses, takes on Jake the Juggernaut Ellenberger, the current record of 30 wins and 11 defeats. Now, both fighters are currently slumping. We'll say that. Brown is 1-3 in his last 4 matchups, while Jake Ellenberger is 1-5 in his last 6. Both guys have been taking on elite competition, including Robbie Lawler, the champion, in these current slumps. For the way I look at it, Brown has appeared much more competitive during his struggles. Ellenberger certainly has had some bigger issues over his current losing skid. Brown was the last man to beat Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, which is worth talking about, where Ellenberger lost by knockout in that matchup against Wonderboy. Both guys lost to Robbie Lawler, Brown going the distance, and Ellenberger getting put down. Jake actually has been finished in 3 of his 5 losses during this current slip. Brown just 1 of his last 3, which was a submission loss to Damian Maia in his last fight. Now for Brown, 12 wins by knockout, 6-10 in fights ended by submission, 2-4 in fights go the distance, which is kind of a shocking number. He's coming off the first submission loss of his career since 2011, so he seemed to have cleaned up some of those submission things. But against Damian Maia, you know what he's going for, and he's very difficult to stop. For Jake Ellenberger, 18-3 in fights ended by knockouts. The guy has significant power. 6-2 in fights ended by submission, 6-6 in the scorecards. Now, of his 5 finishes, 4 of them have come in his last 6 fights. So that certainly is concerning. Physically, Brown is 3 inches taller. He'll have a 4-inch reach advantage, and he is 4 years older. Now, for Matt Brown, he has become known for his durability and very scrappy, in-your-face style. He overwhelms his opponents with his pace and pressure and piles up the damage. For Ellenberger, at his best, he offers a nice mix of wrestling and power striking, trying to improve his technical aspect of his game, but that durability has certainly dropped off the table in his fights of late, and that it's costing him. Jake, another thing you look at is the impact of his wrestling. It's not there anymore. 18 takedowns over the first 10 fights in his UFC career, where he had a record of 8-2. Over his last 6 matchups, he's landed just 4, and he's gone 1-5, as I mentioned. He's an NCAA Division II wrestler, and in that stretch, those last 6 fights, he's only attempted 12 takedowns. Some of those matchups did end early, so he didn't get a chance to really get into the wrestling mode, but he just didn't seem to have that want to go and shoot and bust guys up on the ground. Kelvin Gastelum had a lot of success putting Ellenberger on the mat and grinding him into the cage, and eventually submitted him after Ellenberger kind of looked stunned in a scramble. And the thing is, so you can see Jake, not only is he not being offensive with his wrestling, he's struggling on the mat as well defensively. Brown, 61% takedown defense. He has been taken down. Maia took him down 3 times and submitted him, as I said. Johnny Hendricks 9 times. Robbie Lawler took him down twice. But other than that, just 1 takedown over the other 8 fights given up in his last 11 matchups. For Ellenberger, against Tarek Saffiedine, he showed excellent pressure early on, short punches in close, dirty boxing, his best techniques. He throws a nice left jab, power right hook. He landed that right hook against Saffiedine and certainly stunned him. Similar against Gastelum, he landed a hard right hook in an exchange that kind of backed him off a little bit. He doesn't throw a ton of kicks. And the other numbers that concern me, 2.13 strikes landed per minute versus 2.44 strikes absorbed per minute. So his offense is less than what he's getting hit on average. He's not active enough. He sits at range, doesn't let his hands go, and his opponent's able to simply be busier than him. Ellenberger has been outlanded, or at least hasn't outlanded 8 of his last 9 opponents. Even in victories where he's knocked guys out, the offense wasn't there until the big shot came. He is 12-8 in fights that do not end in knockouts. You see what I'm driving at here. He's very reliant on his power to get the job done. For Brown, I said relentless clinch attack, and he does a very good job of grabbing his opponent's head, using his height and his leverage, pulling him down into elbows and knee strikes to emphasize the impact of those shots. He will also look for foot sweeps in the clinch and to put them down. Fighters are worried about getting hit in the head. They're not thinking about their feet, and that's what Brown can capitalize on. He'll throw some nice chopping low and body kicks, a push kick down the middle. He'll also go high. He has a very nice step and elbow, fires out that left jab, and he has a very long straight right, which hurts guys, especially if they're trying to stay away from that clinch or if they're trying to close the gap and bull rush him. If he can counter with that, very effective. He will land some nice elbows in close and blitz. He blitzed Means, grabbed that neck for the submission when Means tried to come in. When Tim looked for a takedown or later in that fight, he was able to grab it and threaten with that. He's very good off his back. But overall, Brown, he needs to be very careful not to be too aggressive. He has a fantastic chin. He's never been knocked out, but that can happen to anybody, especially as you're getting on in years. And Jake still has power. If he's too aggressive, he could walk right into a power shot or a takedown, which could put him on his back in a position he doesn't want to be in. Matt Brown is also incredibly vulnerable to the body. We've seen him get hit. Jordan Meehan had a lot of success cracking to the body and almost finished him with that. I also believe Eric Silva did as well. Matt Brown will take a shot to land when he's a very good clinch. We saw him hurt Means with a right hand, hurt by Means with a right hand. He can be hurt in the exchange, but again, I don't think Ellenberger has the offense to really do him in. He could look for takedowns, Jake could, but again, and Hendricks had success, but Matt is so good at stuffing guys' takedowns and backing them off and then drawing them into that clinch position where he's very good. He's also very good at neutralizing opponents off his back if they do get on top and getting back to his feet from that position. I think Ellenberger is going to struggle to match Brown's pace. He's going to freeze up on the outside. Again, he hasn't shown that commitment to his wrestling to work the takedowns, which would be an effective weapon here. I don't think Ellenberger is going to fare very well under the damage so much it starts to pile up. Those desperation takedown attempts he might shoot afterwards could put him in the risk of being getting sprawled on and tapped with that Darce choke or a guillotine. I think Brown breaks him down, takes some damage, during that stretch, but eventually overwhelms Jake, and my prediction is Matt Brown to defeat Jake Ellenberger by TKO. We move now to the co-main event of the evening, and this is going to be a crackerjack of a fight. We are in the women's strawweight division as the number 3 ranked and former title challenger Thug Rose Namajunas, 6 wins and 2 losses, takes on, and I'm probably going to butcher this, I've heard it said different ways, the 5th ranked Polish fighter Karolina Kowalkiewicz. We'll go with undefeated at 9-0. Now, winner of this fight could very well get the next title shot, and I think that's certainly something the UFC is looking at. Namajunas has already been there, and I said Karolina is looking for her opportunity to fight for the title against a fellow Polish fighter in Joanna Champion. Now, for Karolina, she has wins over a pair of girls from the Ultimate Fighter tournament that crowned the original champion, including Randa Marcos, who Rose defeated in the tournament semifinals. Since her title fight loss, Rose has been on an absolute tear, submitting Angela Hill, absolutely derailing Paige Van Zandt, submitting her in a fight that I predicted, and avenging a 2013 loss to Tecia Torres as well. Rose, 2 inches taller. They will have the same reach, and Thug Rose, 7 years younger than her opponent. Now, looking at Namajunas first, she has 4 wins by submission, 1 loss in that category, 1-1 on the scorecards, black belt in Taekwondo and Karate, BJJ purple belt, so a very well-versed combat competitor. For Karolina, she has 1 win by knockout, 2 submission wins, 6-0 in fights go the distance. She comes from a Muay Thai and Krav Maga background, so a nice striking base and grappling base there as well. We've seen that a little bit in her run so far, but predominantly striking. For Namajunas, very dynamic fighter, multifaceted fronts to her attack. She's improved her wrestling significantly, much better at securing position before wildly going for submissions, which had cost her in previous fights. Much better cardio, looks more relaxed in there, and just she has grown leaps and bounds since coming into the UFC. For Rose, some of the techniques she likes to employ, that body lock takedown was very effective against Paige Van Zandt. We've seen it effective in a number of scenarios. Strong in the clinch, she'll counter takedown attempts and get in a better position. She'd had success against Tecia Torres there. And once she can posture up, she has a very long torso and long limbs. She can get up and hit people where they cannot control her because they can't reach her. And that's a very effective technique to have, or ability to have on the mat. She's an incredibly submission-savvy fighter. She can take an opponent's back in a lightning quick second and look for that submission with that rear naked choke. Very effective as well. Very active on top. She'll look to pass, brutal elbows and ground and pound, which really broke down Paige Van Zandt. When she's standing, good combinations. She has a nice left jab, straight right. She'll work together. She'll mix in an uppercut. She'll also throw a left hook at range. I really like the way she can step in with that right or pop back and throw a left counter as well. And she finds her range very quickly. She seems to be a fighter who's, boom, she's right into where she knows she can hit her opponent. Her opponent can't hit her, and she goes to work. She doesn't take a lot of time to feel things out. She landed a nice stiff left counter to crack Torres with lots of kicking techniques. As I said, jumping front kick, side kick to the stomach really mixes things up quite nicely. Now, Torres had some success drawing her into close range with a brawl. And her best offense, Torres' best offense in that matchup came in a 3 and 4 punch flurries where she got on the inside and let her hands go. But Rose was able to shut that down with a clinch. And same thing with Paige. Anytime Paige started unloading, Rose just clinched up with her, neutralized it, and reset and went back to work. Tecia also, one area she did have success against Rose was she was catching. Whenever Rose would start a technique and then stop, we'd see Tecia Torres sneak in and crack her with something. And also landed a lot of nice leg kicks. So those are some things that Karolina Kowalkiewicz is probably going to look to try and employ in this matchup. Now, she is a high-volume striker. A lot of combinations. Throws a nice straight right. She'll throw some side kicks, working an uppercut as well. She'll work some nice level elbows at range, and she's a very solid counter striker. She mixes in a left jab, straight right combination. She tends to let her left hand hang a little bit low. That could be to bait her opponents in, but it can leave her open to anything, something Rose might be able to sneak in with that, that diminished defensive front. One thing I really like what she does, at the end of her combination, she'll throw a low kick. Next time we might see her go high with a high kick, and then we'll see her mixing a knee at the end of the combinations, and you're attacking all areas of the body at different depths. and it makes your opponents constantly think about what is coming next. Oh, this came last time, so I'll be prepared for it, and then you're getting kicked in the head. She can strike very effectively in close range, controls the head very nicely, throws a lot of strikes in succession. She'll attack off the break as well. A lot of power in close. I said knees. Best offense in her last 2 matchups came in tight. She even was spinning back kick in close and landed it very effectively. When she fought Heather Jo Clark, she landed some nice knees in the Muay Thai clinch, followed with some level trajectory elbows as well. And, overall, that's where her best success has been. When Randa Marcos did have some success in the clinch against her, but again, it was Karolina getting the majority of the action in. When Heather Jo Clark landed her best strikes against Karolina, it was at distance. She was landing an overhand right with regular, success. But again, as soon as Karolina closed in, it was all the Polish fighter there. Again, Karolina, another thing she does, she has this tendency to be a bit of a slow starter. Had the first round of each of her matchups, the overall strike, she has been hit more than her opponent, but then she seems to pick up the pace and get things going. She starts to throw more kicking techniques once she can establish that her takedown defense is good enough to hold up. But until that point occurs, she's not quite as effective a fighter. I think against Rose, that's something we don't know if we'll see her. We've seen her taken down in fights outside of the UFC. We saw Randa Marcos get that body lock and put her on the mat and was able to have a lot of success holding her back and threatening with a submission. Clark got a body lock takedown. Even though Karolina was able to get up, it showed she can be taken down. But what I like here is I think Rose is the much longer fighter. She fights much longer. She can hit Karolina with her techniques where Karolina cannot hit her, and she'll be looking to close that distance. Look for Rose to use the clinch once Karolina gets on the inside, jam her up. Look for takedown opportunities as well, and separate once Kowalkiewicz tries to land those strikes in close. I think the threat of the takedown that Rose offers is going to be huge to really mute the offense that her opponent is going to put out, take away those kicks for the entire duration of the fight. I think Rose will eventually get her down, wear her down with her pace, get on top, do some damage with those elbows. And, Karolina can't afford a slow start because once Rose settles in, she is go, go, go and very difficult to catch up with. Rose is easily the most multifaceted fighter that Karolina Kowalkiewicz has faced to date. I think Rose eventually gets the fight to the mat, will take her back, and my prediction is Rose Namajunas to defeat Karolina Kowalkiewicz by submission. Finally, now we move to the main event of the evening. It's the UFC's welterweight title that will be up for grabs as the reigning champion, the ruthless one, Robbie Lawler, 26 wins, 10 losses, and 1 no contest, takes on the 4th-ranked fighter in the division, the chosen one, fellow Strikeforce alumni Tyron Woodley with a current record of 15 wins and 3 defeats. Now, Lawler is coming up a split decision victory over Carlos Condit in a fight that I picked Carlos Condit to win. He has won 5 in a row, including 2 title defenses. For Woodley, he's coming off back-to-back victories after a one-sided loss to Rory McDonald, and prior to that, he had beat Carlos Condit, but was due to injury, which is very disappointing. That would have been a great matchup. He is coming into this fight after an 18-month layoff. We'll talk about that momentarily. That's a long time to be out of action. And return to face the best in the division. Lawler, 2 inches taller, while they have the same 74-inch reach, and they're the same age. But Robbie has 20 more pro fights on his resume. As I said, they're both former Strikeforce fighters. Woodley actually lost his opportunity to win the Strikeforce welterweight title when he took on Nate Marquardt to crown the new champion. So he's getting another opportunity here to win a title, a big title, to say the least. Now, for Robbie, 20 wins by knockout. His power is well established in our brains. He is 1-5 in fights ended by submission, 6-4 on the scorecards. For Woodley, 5 wins by knockout, 1 knockout loss, which is the aforementioned loss to Nate Marquardt. 5-0 in fights ended by submission, 5-2 in the scorecards. Now, some people might look at that and go, 5 wins by submission. Robbie Lawler's got 5 losses. That should play a factor. Nuh-uh. Last submission win for Tyron Woodley came back in 2009. The first 5 fights of his career all ended by submission. He has not shown a lick of interest in submission fighting since that matchup. Now, for Woodley, he is 8-0 in fights that end in the opening 2 rounds. But 5-3 in the 3rd round and beyond, and that includes coming off that last victory over Kelvin Gastelum, which Kelvin slowed down in. He has actually lost 3 of his last 4 fights to go into the 3rd round or beyond, and 2 of his 4 Strikeforce decision victories that can count on the record were both split decisions. So you see what I'm kind of driving at there. Woodley has an inability or struggles to win fights based on their length. His cardio definitely shows up as an issue, and he has a lot of inability. He has struggled to deal with pressure, and that's well documented. We've seen that a lot. And those things, bad cardio and struggling to deal with pressure, they go hand in hand. One begets the other, if you will. For his takedown game, he's a very effective wrestler. He has that blast power double. He can smother opponents. We saw a lot of that in Strikeforce. He's kind of gotten away from that. He had 3 takedowns against Carlos Condit, and I believe overall he has just 6 total takedowns since coming to the UFC. I believe those are the numbers that are correctly. And a lot of times it's because his cardio suffers. We saw him go for a takedown against Rory McDonald. I think it was Rory McDonald, yeah. And he basically partially completed it, got up, and you could see he was breathing heavy, and he was slowing down significantly in that matchup. Once he starts to slow down, he allows his opponents to set the pace. He willingly puts his back on the cage, and the Rory McDonald was a great example of that, but it's not the only example where he was backing up and getting teed off on. Now, that's a lot of the shitty stuff about Tyron Woodley. Let's talk about some of the good stuff. He has a brutal right hand, and he can cover a lot of distance with it and launch it, and it catches a lot of guys off guard, and he can do a heck of a lot of damage when it lands. He has a very hard, stiff leg kick as well. He can really batter his opponent. He'll go to the body. He'll go to the head as well. But he needs more strikes other than that right hand, and those leg kicks can certainly be an answer to that. Against Gastelum, he showed us a lot more lateral movement than we've seen. Again, he counts on his speed and his explosiveness to close that distance, so he'll sit out of range, again, launch forward into that attack. One thing that's concerning, and we'll see if he's changed this up with all the time off, he's not a big threat from the left side, and because of that, there's not a ton of setup for that right hand, and it would make it that much more effective if he could attack from the left and, boom, bring the right in response to his opponents defending the left hand. A lot of his single shots, they can be effective, but again, they're single shots. Good fighters will avoid them. He actually has a negative 1.7 striking exchange rate, and a lot of that has to do with he goes into a defensive shell in fights where it's not over quickly. And that's something we'll talk about. With Robbie Lawler, he has an absolute massive right hand, but he has power in all his weapons. And his ability to absorb damage and rally and come back, not saying he can't get hurt, but his ability to come back and keep pushing. And we saw it against Johnny Hendricks in the 5th round, against Rory McDonald in the 5th round, against Carlos Condit in the 5th round. All those were fights where he was down or he needed a big performance in a grueling matchup, and he pulled through and got the job done. He'll also throw a right jab. He has a nice front kick down the middle, which he can land to the body or the chin. The jumping knee to go to Adlan Amagov back in Strike Force. He'll throw head kicks. I believe he stopped Bobby Volker with one of those. And he just has a lot of weapons that are dangerous. Now, some of the things Robbie I don't like that he does, and we've seen him get away from it a little bit, especially in that first Johnny Hendricks matchup, though he tries to shell up and roll with punches. And he's had a lot of issues with combinations. Matt Brown hurt him with combinations. Both Carlos Condit and Johnny Hendricks found the most success by mixing up their offensive attack, varying what they're throwing at him. Rory McDonald battered him along the cage by mixing it up. Knees, elbows, kicks, punches. Just keep throwing stuff at him and don't let him, settle in and, see what you're bringing and be able to anticipate. For Lawler, when he fought Hendricks, he was very aggressive early in that matchup, pushed him back, landed some nice knees to the body. He cut off the cage very effectively against Carlos Condit. But at times he can almost be too wild, and he needs to be careful. Dong Young Kim was very aggressive against Tyron Woodley and got caught with a big right hand and knocked out, attempting a spinning back fist. And Robbie might be tough, but if you get blasted with one of those right hands, you are going to be in some serious trouble. Carlos Condit was kind of reminiscent. Carlos Condit launched himself into a right hand and hurt Lawler early in that matchup. Lawler's takedown defense has been one of the things that's led to his rise, though. We saw a good takedown defense against Johnny Hendricks, especially in the second matchup, punish his opponent on prolonged attempts. He does an excellent job against a power double, which Josh Koscheck early on shot for the power double. He got his hips back and got his underhooks, got back up very quickly. On the feet, though, going back to that, which is where this fight is going to be won or lost, I really like the way Robbie Lawler hand fights. Always up in front. It muddies that distance up, and it forces opponents to try and work through that before they can attack. And Carlos Condit was trying to jump through some of those, like I expect to see Tyron Woodley do, and Lawler was landing some nice counters. With Tyron Woodley, he's been off for a long time. And Robin Black did a great job of breaking this down. How much has he improved? What has he done differently in that time span? And certainly he could be a totally different fighter technique-wise. But I don't believe he has changed his body, and that's what I'm concerned with here. His physical ability to go 5 rounds is going to be the difference between a win and a loss. Woodley has to win this matchup by knockout. He cannot take a decision as far as I can see. He doesn't have the volume or the style to outpoint Lawler over 5 rounds on the feet, and he can't land takedowns and out-wrestle him for 5 rounds because it will tax his cardio too much. Especially with Robbie's takedown defense that makes him work so hard, I would imagine Woodley would be gassing by the second round, 3rd at best, and getting absolutely teed off on by Robbie once he slows down. Robbie can't be careless in this matchup and walk into a right hand, but after things settle down, he should be able to see Woodley's offensive attempts coming at him and anticipate and avoid them to lessen the blow, at the very least. Woodley, I think, is going to go into a defensive shell and start firing those single shots once he tastes Lawler's power and pressure. Look for takedown attempts that get punished when they don't get completed, and I look for Woodley to start slowing down if this fight goes beyond the first round, probably as early as midway through the second round. Once Woodley starts to back up, his head comes up, his movement is limited by the cage, and Robbie is going to absolutely tee off in that scenario. And my prediction is Robbie Lawler to defeat Tyron Woodley to once again retain his title, and Robbie Lawler is going to do it by knockout. So those are my 5 main card predictions for UFC 201. Yes, they were much longer. I did a much... I always do a thorough job. I think I do a thorough job of breaking fights down, but I watched a lot more footage. I did a different order of the way I did it. I pulled a lot of, as I said, research from previous fights, and then went back and rewatched a lot of the footage and just broke the fighters down basically from square one. Tried to alleviate or remove past understandings of how I thought fighters were to just get a very up close and personal opinion of how each fight was going to go down. We'll see if it's effective. All of my preliminary predictions will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. Please check them out. The polls are up. Please vote and see who the public is picking in each matchup. The prediction panel also putting their picks up. Some of the guys are posting. Some guys just haven't got a chance to get around to it, so please weave through and see who's got posts up and who does not. The bet packs, certainly consider buying. It's only $12. Your money should be spent on betting, so I'm not going to charge you more than $12 for one show. Some guys like to charge $50. I've seen much more than that. For $74, you get my next 8 cards. You can't get 2 cards on other websites for that money. So there you go. I'll give you fantasy. And the other thing I do, fantasy breakdowns for every fight, 2 DraftKings lineups, betting breakdowns for everything, props, parlays, confidence lists, counter bets. Here's a guy I picked against, but I think is a good bet. Take a shot. My value bets. Here is the best combination of risk reward on the card. I give you as much as I possibly can. I'm not going to be one of these assholes who you spend big money on to see, well, I'm going to take Francis Ngannou and Frankie Saenz, two fighters, put those together, parlay them up. That's my big parlay for the night. That's bullshit. Don't pay for that crap. Don't buy my stuff either if you're doing well on your own. Certainly continue what you're doing. If it's effective, by all means, continue what you're doing. But yeah, have a go at it if you're not. Follow me on Twitter, KO_predictions. And for now, thanks for tuning in. Feel free to email me, contact through the Facebook page. I always try to respond as quickly as possible. If you don't like something I'm doing or want to discuss something you didn't agree with, just approach me in a positive manner. At least don't be an asshole, and we'll have no problem chatting it up. I enjoy that thoroughly. And thanks for tuning in, guys. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.